Hello, friends, and thank you for joining me today. I'm Jennifer Clair, and this is Jennifer Clair Astrology. In today's video, I'll be showing you a natal chart and discussing the main components within it. But before I begin, I'd like to invite you to leave a comment below at the end so I know what kind of videos you're after. My goal is to tailor this channel to your specific needs and your specific interests. That said, let's jump into today's topic on how to read a natal chart. For this tutorial, I want you to imagine that this is your birth chart. The first thing you'll notice is that all the birth information is in the left-hand corner, including the date, the time, and the place that you were born. Now, I use the Placidus house system, so that might change this wheel if you use a different house system. But just looking at this wheel, this is literally a snapshot of the sky when you were born. The horizontal line cutting across the middle is going to be the horizon line. So east would be on the left and west would be on the right. Everything above the horizon was in the sky visible at the time of your birth, and everything below the horizon was not. The line that cuts right up at the top is called the meridian, and it shows us where the sun was at the highest point in the sky. So sometimes it's directly ahead, sometimes it's a little bit over. It really depends on the time of year and how long it took for the sun to come up and reach its highest point. So in this case, the sun took less time to descend and go towards the horizon and set than it did from the time it rose to reach the highest point in the sky. Along the perimeter of the wheel, we have all the zodiac signs. And these are important to note because they will tell us what constellations the planets were in when you were born. So in this case, we see that there is a lot of planets in both the sign Taurus and the sign Aries. And the time of your birth is what determines where all these signs line up. So just to give you an example, if you were born just 11 minutes earlier from that 8:43 a.m. time, then you would have been Gemini rising, not Cancer rising. So whatever sign is on the left-hand side on the eastern horizon at the time of your birth, that is your rising sign. So this is why the birth time is so essential to getting an accurate chart. All these symbols in the middle are either planets or mathematical points. So we have the part of fortune, which looks like an X marks the spot. That's a mathematical point. And then we have the nodes of the moon, which are very important in evolutionary astrology. The north node is up here, which looks like a horseshoe. And then we have the south node directly opposite of it, which is in Libra. The lunar nodes are simply mathematical points in the sky where the moon crosses the ecliptic. There's a south point represented by the south node, and there's a north point represented by the north node. Then there's Chiron, the wounded healer archetype, but that's also an asteroid, and that's represented by this green key-like symbol. Now the houses are going to be these areas here, numbered 1 through 12, that look like little pie slice shapes. And these are very important because they represent the areas of life that we all experience as humans. And they're literally areas of space in the sky that are calculated based on the time that you were born. So, as I mentioned earlier, if you were born just 11 minutes earlier, you would have been a Gemini rising. And that means that Gemini would not be intercepted in the 12th house or stuck in the middle of a house. And this is quite significant because there are implications when you have intercepted signs. It's not bad, it just adds to the complexity of your chart. But back to the houses in general. Each house has special meaning about the environment you experience or your own state of being. So for the first house, we know this represents yourself, your body, your appearance, the physical impressions that you make on others. And it also is how you view yourself. So it's very important. Then you go right across, the seventh house is the house of partnerships and marriage and how you interact with another in a one-on-one partnership. And I'm not going to go through all the houses because I do that in depth on my online class, Foundations of Astrology. But what I will say is it's important for you to become familiarized with the meaning of each house, especially if you have a stellium or more than three planets in one house, such as this chart. We have a lot going on in the 11th house. Next, I'd like to talk about the aspects. So if you look to the middle of the wheel, you see these lines with shapes. These are called aspects. Aspects are simply geometrical angles that connect the planets to one another. Aspects are really what pull the whole chart together. The aspects are also a topic that I will address more fully in my class. But for today, I just want to give you some important notes about the aspects. The reason they're so important to consider is because they tell us the type of communication that's happening between the planets, which translates to the type of communication that's happening within our own psyche. We have different parts of ourselves, and the aspects really display that in our charts. There's degrees such as 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or 0 to 5 degrees that are quite significant, and all these aspects have names. So let's talk about the one that's most obvious in this chart, a conjunction, which is whenever two planets are within 0 to 5 degrees of one another. You have Venus, Saturn, and this is the north node. So we'll call these three placements since they're not all planets. But you see, one is at 16 degrees, the other is 17, and the other is 18 degrees. So they're all within 5 degrees of each other. This would be a lot to unpack because whenever there is even just two planets that are that close together, you have a fusion of energy, which is just to say, if Saturn is about discipline and hard work and waiting patiently, and Venus is about love and romance and aesthetics, then there may be delays from Saturn in receiving these blessings from Venus. But there are so many other possibilities as well, so we can't end it there. We have to always look at our chart holistically to see the whole picture of what's going on. So now you know the aspects tell us a great deal more about your behavioral tendencies based on what planets are involved. One other important note that I want to make about aspects is that it's not just about planets. You can have aspects with significant points in your chart. So this is the ascendant, where we have Cancer here rising. It's at 1 degree. And then if you look up at Chiron, it's also at 1 degree. It's making a perfect 90-degree angle. So that's a square aspect. And that's something that you would want to understand if you were looking at this chart for yourself. Lastly, I want to talk to you about the quadrants. So what I mean by that is houses 1 through 3, 4 through 6, 7 through 9, and then 10 through 12. So in each quadrant, you have specific meaning about the developmental cycle of your life. So in other words, if this is your chart and you have all this emphasis in the 11th house, you're going to want to study this quadrant and understand the meaning of it. It's just an added layer that you can go into to learn more about yourself. In case you're wondering why there are no planets in certain houses, that's just because these are areas of the sky that did not have planets. And it doesn't mean anything bad about your chart or insignificant. It just means you have less focus there or less karma, less lessons to deal with. So don't think of that as a bad thing. I hope you've enjoyed this quick tutorial on your natal chart. If you like what you heard today and you want to know more, check out my hour-and-a-half class called Foundations of Astrology, linked below. This class is an in-depth exploration of not only the planets, signs, aspects, and houses, but the energies they represent and how they affect you on a personal level. Thank you for watching, and feel free to share your comments below.